Got that? Yeah. All right. Let's call the meeting to order. Start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everybody. Everybody online, welcome. We'll start with the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any questions, comments, anything to be pulled? Anybody? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay. Next is the nominations to run for, Dutchess County BOCES Board. There are 3 seats open. There are 3 people, Ralph, Chimento, Stanford Gully, and Mark Fleischauer. Does anybody have an issue with, nominating all 3? It doesn't mean we're voting for them or that, you know, we're endorsing it, we're endorsing them to run.
Who was
Am
the
I-
first Holland?
Right there. Am I confused? I thought there was a 4.
There are 4.
Yep.
Okay.
It's Ralph Chimento,
Yes, you're
Gully
right.
Sanford, Mark Fleischauer, and Bryce
Bryce.
Holland.
Yeah, we didn't get a letter from one, that's why you don't
Okay.
see it,
From
Perry.
Ralph
So we
Chimento.
also,
Oh, from Ralph.
it says potential nominees for 3 open seats, and
Yeah.
that just has the 3 names.
I'm sorry about that. I have to add.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Ralph Schmidt there.
He just said.
Okay.
We don't have his letter. We just have his letter explaining that he would be, going through this process as the president of BOCES Board.
Yeah, I just have to add Mr. Holland on that, in my little write-up there.
All right, so how do we,
But
Yeah,
we're
we can-
allowed to nominate all 4.
Yeah.
oh, that's true,
Yes.
that is
Wrong.
true, that is true. Okay,
Some people that you have to have.
Right.
yeah, does anyone have, any issue with nominating all 4? Do we need a motion or,
You'll do a motion to approve the nomination for all 4.
okay, do I have a motion to, nominate all 4?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, next is, President and Vice President's report. The only thing I have is, I know it's getting late, but, if anyone is interested in running for, school board or just wondering what it's all about, there's a workshop at BOCES, I believe, on March 15th. For prospective school board members. It doesn't mean that you're, you know, signing up to run. It just means, you might want to run, or you just want to find out more about what the school board does. Anyway, that's all I have. Chris, do you want me to? No. All right. Caroline?
Yes, good evening, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. I have a couple of updates, and then I just wanted to walk through a couple of things covered at the superintendent's conference. The New York State Council of School Superintendents held its conference in Albany last week, to align to Lobby Day. So there was lots going on in Albany during that time. And then I actually have a, very basic budget update in terms of what we're hearing from the state. So I had the fortunate experience of attending the House of Delegates, which is not an organization that I typically participate in. I am on the Legislative Council. But the House of Delegates has different roles and requirements, but the two representatives from Dutchess County were unable to attend, so I volunteered to go in their place to just kind of have exposure, hear what goes on in that type of meeting. It was pretty interesting. So the curriculum committee updated some of the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission, which is going to, or has made a recommendation to the Board of Regents to reshape, graduation requirements. And that's where the portrait of graduate and the journey of a graduate kind of work is coming from. It's also about the updated, requirements for graduation. And so they went through the requirements by cohort over the next couple of years, from 2024-5 this school year, and then ending in 2029, sort of like the phase-in of the new requirements as recommended. One of the things that's pretty interesting is that if this passes, kiddos who are currently in 9th grade may have different graduation requirements, more flexibility in terms of how they can earn their graduation credits and credentials than they currently do. So they'll be working along the path aligned completely with the Regents track. And then in the 2027-2028 school year, that flips to uncouple the Regents assessment from graduation. So some of these kiddos may actually not need the Regents that they're taking, but it's not going to be until their senior year that that flexibility is built in. So I feel like there's a little bit of tweaking that may come along when the Regents have an opportunity to review it. But it was really interesting, the conversations that were had around these requirements. There was conversation about the zero emissions buses. The governor has said that this goal is aspirational. Whatever that means.
Didn't sound like it was.
Correct, but I think it's slowly,
All right.
an acknowledgement that with all the factors being considered, the deadline, the timeline really is an aspirational timeline. There were some legislative updates in the House of Delegates and the Legislative Committee that were in parallel, talked about, Safe Harmless being maintained for this school year and recommendations to the change in the poverty calculations. So, currently there's like the free and reduced lunch data that is utilized as poverty measures. So they're looking to move away from that. And the reason, well, part of the reason for that is that the way in which that data is collected is sort of moot at this point, since we're moving towards universal meals. And so that is something that there's a whole calculation of how it will be calculated in the future, recommended to be calculated in the future by the Rockefeller Institute. So more on that. There's some information about the sort of, so this is from the curriculum committee now, the portrait of a graduate. Very interesting, the work that is recommended. But again, until this is approved, it's kind of hard to know what direction we're going in long term. So we have to work on the current requirements and standards. But then at some point, if this goes into effect, it's going to be a lot of like revisioning some of the work that we're doing. So it would be nice to have kind of a better idea of when this is going to be decided. One of the proposed changes is the changing, they'll be changing the Regents scoring, similar like the 4-point scale that's used for other state tests. So it'll no longer be 0 to 100, it'll be grade bands. So that'll be interesting to see. There will be more of a competency-based learning hours structure that will be different than the current credits that we use. So that's very interesting. And then there was this whole panel discussion about the Department of Education overall. They talked about the new administrative certifications and pathways. So it's designed to sort of streamline the process. They were very clear that nobody in sitting administrative roles would have to recertify, even though the certifications are changing. So back when, I don't know how many years ago, but at one point there was an SDA, which was like the school district administrator, and then it switched to building the school SBL, SDL. Similarly, Rick was SDA, so like someone like Rick didn't have to go back and do any of the new requirements to maintain a certification. So it will just be as all the things we have to do now to maintain our certification, but anybody new, so all of the preparation programs are switching to this. There were lots of conversations around cell phone use in school, really pushing, you know, it's funny because there's this tug of war going on between the administrative unions, the superintendents, organizations, teachers unions, and the governor. The governor is insistent that, this needs to be achieved through a mandate, and many schools are saying, well, we already do that, or, we don't want a mandate, give us an opportunity to kind of figure it out locally, what works for us. How do you define band? Does that mean they're not even allowed on school grounds? So it's just a lack of clarity, and so I think everyone would kind of appreciate clarity and or guardrails for local control kind of thing. There's a ton of different federal policies that intersect with state laws. I know that, when we had our attorneys here not too long ago, they kind of mentioned some of that. It seems that as the climate changes politically, there's more and more of that where, you know, New York State funds say you must do this and federal funds say you can no longer do that. So it's really an uncertain time for people sitting in our positions. And I feel like it's going to be a situation that as things sort of get litigated, right, we'll have guidance that come from commissioners' decisions and or unfortunately lawsuits, right? So that's where we will get our game plan from. There was information about our students who are here as migrant students and sort of guardrails and guidelines of how to interact with law enforcement outside of the local law enforcement. There was tons of conversation about foundation aid. As you know, the governor's executive budget run included a 2% minimum foundation aid for everyone, but there were many people around the room who were talking about the fact that yep, we got the 2% foundation aid, but we took major hits, transportation being one of them. We're not the only district in the region that took big hits in transportation with seemingly no reason for it. So, you know, we've had conversations at the state level to try and figure out why that is. They're ongoing. I know Ashley and Elliot have been in contact with folks at State Ed. Haven't really got any good answers as to why our transportation aid has been cut back, but we're not the only ones, and it's not the only type of aid that's been cut and or just has not come through yet. For an example, we had an increase in English language learners this year, as you all know, from August to the beginning of the school year, right? There was a big jump requiring us to hire even an additional teacher. And so we have not seen any increase in any special aid of any sort that would reflect that. So that was sort of the conference. Lots going on. I feel like every single day things are changing. And some of them with very little clarity as to what the changes are. Today we did get the one house and the Senate and Assembly like recommendations for the budget. So some of that had bright spots in it where the 2% is actually recommended to be closer to like 2.9, 3%. And so there's some hopeful brighter points to that, but we won't know anything until anything official comes out last minute for our budgeting timeline. But we're hopeful that we will get a little more money, but that's really for us just a little, it's just making it a little less bad. We're right now, like we had said, there's a gap that we need to close. So we reevaluate every time we get any new bit of information. And we've been working collaboratively, you know, my office, Dr. Watkins and, you know, Elliot and Ashley are working very closely to try and figure out the best way to maintain operations. Being considerate of how much money we're projected to get, knowing that those are only projections. And even once the budget is designed, that's also just a budget, right? So it's an estimate. We won't know for sure until we're living it next year, how much money we're actually going to be receiving. So I do have some other information in my report that's sort of like happenings around the district. I know Rick is here. He's going to talk about some of the athletics, which, you know, was really exciting. We had a really exciting winter season. And so if there's anything that you have any questions about feel free to ask them, but also we had, the first round of interviews for our Olden Place principal, and we were really excited that we were able to, narrow the field, and we feel like we have a really good group of candidates that we're looking to, go through a second round of interviews, sort of a principal Olympics, as we like to call it. So there will be a bunch of activities or tasks that are aligned, authentically to the job that we would ask them to do as principal. And so I have reached out to Perry and Chris and said that I would like, I know that there can only be 3, but I would like, board participation if there's anybody that would want to volunteer for that. And then if there's anybody that could make themselves available for that process, which will be on next Monday, which will be, afternoon into the evening, because we can't relieve all of the staff if they would like to participate, so we can't really do it during the school day. And so if anybody is able to be available and would like to participate, we can get you more details in the coming days.
Just like the 15th?
It's the
No,
17th,
17th.
yeah.
17th, and what time does it start?
It starts at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock to,
Mhm.
to 1 o'clock.
Approximately 5:45. Will there be Guinness? Or? You just go wear your Saints sweater.
Right now. It's out of here.
Yeah, she's,
I should be able to make it. I mean, I don't know. Anyone else?
I might be.
I'm a maybe. I gotta look.
Yeah, have to be maybe.
Okay, so if anybody could, you know, we can't really have more than 3 because then it becomes board action, which we can't do. But if you want to shoot myself and Amy an email and we can kind of go from
Yeah.
there, that's fine. But we would really appreciate your input so that, you know, it's a pretty intensive process and we feel like having all eyes and ears in the room at once, it alleviates asking people to come back multiple times.
Can you send the details to the board, just so we all know, we can kind of see
Yeah,
if it fits?
totally.
Great.
Yep, we can do that.
So just let us, I mean, I can make it, but I don't really want to have just the board, you know, leadership on there. So, if we can get 2 other people, great. If not, I'll be one of them. Just let me know. Let us
I doubt
know.
I can, because I'll be in the city and I have to take a train back, so. I don't think I'd be back until around 5:30, so
Alright.
that's not gonna help.
Howard?
I don't know it as I sit here right now. It's
Okay.
possible, but I don't.
Yeah, so we'll send the details out, so if you can, great. If not, we've reached out to several parents in the community. We tried to kind of pull a cross section. And so we have a couple of parent representatives, we have some staff in the building. And then we have some other folks, in roles around the district that interact with kind of all the buildings.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely have,
And there will be food. Did I mention food? There'll be food.
No cookies.
cookies and candy.
Just yes.
All right. Any questions or comments or concerns for, Caroline's report?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. All right, next up, we have facilities.
Joe's out tonight, so the report's there. If you guys have any questions about that, I can answer them for you.
Just in general, have things since, you know, we really haven't had rain in the last, I don't know, maybe week, right?
Last week.
Yeah, so I
Things
can tell
slowed
you,
down a little bit.
yeah, John's still slowed down. It's weather dependent. John's been working with the guys on the seasonal transitions, so it's checking roof drains, but also as things are melting, you know, the fields and everything is starting to gear up for spring sports. It's been a big focus. John's also been meeting with a number of repair vendors, one in particular that has a somewhat unique roof product for patchwork that could help to us in the short term.
Okay.
So we're running that product spec by our architects and engineers just to get their feedback on experience before we, you know, try this innovative new thing that could be great, but we don't want to, you know, throw good money after bad. So given that we're proposing a tear off and replacement, we're looking to see if this patchwork products would further compound the cost of reconstruction or be negligible and then be, you know, available for consideration. So that's something that John's working on as well.
Okay. All right,
One other question, the floor tiles at Elm, were those ones that were just replaced a few years ago? Are they from damage from something or an area that hadn't been replaced yet?
The tiles that were replaced had popped up. They are vinyl asbestos tiles. So again, they're whole, they weren't aerosoling or friable, but they were removed in whole pieces and then replaced.
Okay, so these weren't any of the work that had been done a few years ago after the ones.
I can't say for certain.
Not for
I know that there's
Yeah.
just conditions that they
Okay.
just keep popping up.
maybe, maybe if you could just have, when is John sick?
Yeah, he's on sick today.
Just when he's feeling better, if he can answer that and send it to the board.
Sure.
All right. All right, high school principal.
Right, so good evening. Thanks for the opportunity this evening. So at the high school, we are continuing our work with our teachers on classroom habits and looking at 1% changes we could all make to ensure we are providing the necessary experiences and support for all of our students by reading classroom habitudes and aligning it to their teaching practices. We have two more chapters to read as a staff as we close out the school year, but it's been great to see our teachers explicitly teach and model the habits we want to see in our students happening, and it's happening in all of our classrooms throughout the building, so that's exciting. We're also continuing our work with utilizing Edmentum for our purposes at the high school. It's an individualized learning program specifically where teachers can create adaptive learning paths to meet each student's individual needs. In addition, thanks to Dr. Watkins, we are having teachers trained to use the Accelerate tool that helps students specifically in math and English who are struggling with specific skills. So once we get that up and running, we're going to be able to utilize Accelerate again in the courses of math and English to identify and address gaps so that we help students and they'll be less likely to struggle and fall further behind. Next, our MTSS team meets twice a month. We just continue to monitor and identify students' progress, specifically focusing on academics, behavior, and social emotional support. Also, our English, social studies, and recently our special education teachers have met with our ELA coach. A lot of work this school year has certainly been accomplished. At their last meeting, teachers brought work based on their previous professional development, and Garrett conferred with them and refined some things. And teachers really seem to be enjoying working with him, and they feel comfortable sharing out takeaways and stealing ideas from one another. So that's really nice to see that it's benefiting all of our teachers. So certainly we're looking forward to seeing reading and writing improvements we hope to see happening in our classrooms. And lastly, it's kind of hard to believe that AP exams and Regents exams are right around the corner. So in the coming weeks, the preparations will begin for these end of the year assessments, and we're certainly hoping to see some great results. In terms of conduct and safety, during the last week of February, I met with all of our students during their lunch periods to review some of our school expectations. Reminders never hurt, and I'm hopeful based on the responses, we'll finish out the school year on a positive note. In terms of drills, so we're up to date on all of our drills at the high school. We have one remaining lockdown drill that will take place in the last marking period during the fourth quarter. And additionally, we will be holding a reunification drill, excuse me. We had a couple dates, we landed on a date, then Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES had a conflict. We rescheduled it to a date that would work for them, but then we recognized that that didn't work for us. So we're still looking for some days in May. But Christy and her team's coming to work with our team as early as March 24th. The middle school team will be assisting us. So we definitely look forward to learning from this experience because we've been on the assisting side of things in the previous years. In terms of special highlights, so a special thanks to Dr. Betts and Miss H. I actually asked Dr. Betts to provide me with a summary of their weekend, just to share with you so that you know that they appreciate your support and approval each year, making this trip happen for our students. So I'll read her summary of this past weekend. So the past weekend, our 24 Blazers left Millbrook for New York City, where they attended the 51st Annual National High School Model UN Conference. Our students joined 4,000 students from around the world to role play as global international relations experts, race and define solutions for issues such as food insecurity, endangered wildfare, the growth of megacities, and criminal justice. For 3 days, they sat in hour-long committee meetings where they crafted speeches, voted on resolutions, and engaged in diplomacy with their fellow committee members. Our students did an incredible job. They gave speeches, did intensive research, and worked with other delegates on finding consensus when it comes to solving global problems. Several of our students were leaders in their committee rooms, typically comprised of 100 to 200 students, and 2 were even presented with the Award of Excellence for their work. Specifically, Kamora and Addie were also invited to give a speech at closing ceremonies in front of nearly 2,000 people. So this weekend was an incredible success, and students should be very proud of themselves. Again, special thanks to Dr. Betts, Ms. H for their hard work all school year working with them. Mr. Lee helped out as a chaperone, but thank you very much.
Awesome.
Yes, for sure. I even received a couple emails from students, which was really nice. They had an incredible experience, so they're looking forward to the next couple of years as well. All right, so as I wrap up, so as Superintendent Hernandez shared, we definitely had a successful winter sports season. Our boys team had advanced to the sectional finals before losing to a really strong Mount Academy team. Who's actually playing tonight in the regional finals. Our girls basketball teams, despite some challenges, we returned a bulk of the girls, so they definitely benefited from their experiences this year. We have a JV program too, so that's going to help continue to build the girls basketball program. We had another successful winter track season as well. We didn't have any students qualify for states this winter, but all of our students did very well at their various meets throughout the season. So the winter season is sadly over. However, we start spring sports on Monday, so we're definitely looking forward to the sunshine, and looks like based on all the students that are coming out, we're going to have some pretty well-balanced teams throughout the course of this spring. So we're looking forward to a good spring sports season. And then just lastly, some upcoming events. We have Music in Our Schools Month concert on March 26th at 6:30. We have our senior trip coming up on March 28th through the 31st. As I think you know, our NHS ceremony was rescheduled to April 2nd at 6:30. Thank you for those who RSVP'd. All are certainly still invited to attend. New this year, our freshman class is hosting a spring fling dance on Friday, April 4th from 6 to 9. So our students are looking forward to that. As I shared, our AP exams are coming up right around the corner. They'll take place between the period of May 5th through May 13th. I also did not include in the agenda our drama production, so I apologize about that. But our drama production, The Addams Family, will take place on May 16th and May 17th at 7 p.m. So I hope you could attend. We'll have our spring blood drive on May 15th. Our prom is May 30th. And then always exciting time of the year, we have our end of the year award ceremonies for grades 9 through 11 on June 9th at 9 a.m. Our seniors award that evening at 6 p.m. Our Regents exams again will take place between the period of June 11th and June 20th, and graduation will take place on Friday, June 20th. Any questions?
I have a question, please. Sorry. Over here. Thank you for that report. I actually have a couple of questions, but first, one of the things I didn't see in the highlights about the STEAM fair. I know you have one student from the high school who participated, who is a name that's not unknown, who seems to participate in many sectors and is very successful. And I wanted to know if you think there could have been more participation, and if so, how that could have gone about, or in future STEAM fairs, how that could go about. So that was my first question.
So yeah, I appreciate the question, and that actually did kind of come up as a concern, and we did extend the deadline, and we had our science teachers speak to the students to try to encourage them to attend. So we'll continue to plug away and try to encourage students to be participants in this STEAM fair. And we'll continue to advertise and just push them, but sometimes it is challenging if they don't have an interest or just a lack of the drive to participate. But the science teachers definitely did try to push them and steer them in that participate.
Okay. I don't know, maybe, an idea, each building tried to get 10% of the population, because it wasn't even 10%. So out of 250 students approximately.
Sure.
My second question was, I'm interested curious as to what feedback was given in the lunch meetings you had about safety and conduct, if you're able to share any of that from the students.
Yeah, so I don't think I received any specific feedback from students, but based on my visitation during the lunch periods, I've seen a marked difference and a lot of cooperation throughout the course of the school day since that last week in February. I know we're only 2 weeks since then, but things have been going relatively well.
Oh, do you mind sharing how so, like what the difference you saw was or anything like that?
Sure.
Nothing specific to children. I mean, like.
So there were just some concerning behaviors that are not typical that have been happening during my prior tenure here. And I just wanted to make sure that I addressed that with all the students in a small environment during their lunch periods, just to express my concerns and just remind them of the expectations in the code of conduct. And again, I have seen a marked difference, so hopefully we'll continue on that trend with appropriate behavior and positivity throughout the building.
Okay. And my last question is about the Addams Family production. Is that being advertised in the community, or tickets being sold, or is that a free event open to everyone?
So I'll work with Chelsea Edson. That's a good question, but we'll be advertising that. So there was some challenges in terms of finding the date in terms of when they were going to roll that out. So it was originally going to happen earlier in the school year, but we needed a little bit more time to push it out. So we do have some time. It's only the second week of March, and it's in May. So we'll be publicizing that in our newsletters and making announcements and sharing information with parents and community members.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank
I
you.
had a quick question.
Sure.
Do we plan this year having a rain date for graduation?
So I think it's rain or shine. So last year, as you know, we had it in the auditorium. I think it was just a matter of a coincidence with the heat and our AC not working at the time. But I did receive some positive feedback in terms of obviously we can't control the weather, but since it was moved inside, I mean.
I was just curious.
Yeah, no,
Some
I
districts
appreciate
have,
the
like,
question,
next
but-
morning if it rains that
Yeah.
night, or I was just
Yeah,
curious.
so it's
about
always
your-
tough because a lot of times we have family that are planning on that date. And they might be,
Vendors, yeah.
what's that?
Vendors also.
Vendors, right?
That's who mostly have asked, just because usually if you have it indoors, your family is very limited.
Sure.
Whereas the outside, so you have all these relatives
For
coming
sure.
in and now they're last minute,
For
they
sure.
can't go. That's why.
Sure. I appreciate the question and, I mean, thankfully here we have pretty small graduating classes, so we were able to fit everybody in, last June, but come on, let's get some,
Yeah, I'm-
positive vibes out there for nice weather, June 20th. We're just asking for one nice night.
Yeah. I have 2 questions.
Sure.
With the MTSS process, is that similar to other schools where, other buildings where there would be, AIS services? Does that happen at the high school?
So it's a little, so yes and no. So it is, it is a little different at the high school. But as you could probably imagine, quite a student schedule is full. And they might not have any room in their availability because of mandated classes that they're taking.
Mhm.
However, we do identify students who are struggling, and if they have a study hall, then we do put them in the learning lab.
Is there, but if there's a specific deficit and
Yeah.
I mean.
So I'll be
math-
more explicit, yes, so I'll expand, so yes. So in those cases, we work with the classroom teachers, they work with the teaching assistant. A lot of times, sometimes whether it's through a Mentum program or just specific coursework, that the teaching assistant works with the classroom teacher to make sure that they identify exactly what they should be doing and the support that they need in that classroom period.
Okay, so there's somebody with expertise in that,
A teaching assistant, who's competent, in yes.
Right. Okay. And then my other question was, as you know, the middle school has repeatedly received the distinction, of middle school, of schools to watch. Is there anything on your radar, high school wise? Are there any high school designations that you plan to pursue?
Good question.
We have been designated a school of excellence.
The
high school?
Right?
Mhm.
Can get a banner or,
No.
or announce that?
I mean, it was announced when we received the designation.
But is that a redesignation?
We don't apply for it.
Okay,
So, yeah, so
So-
it's a designation that's like bestowed upon us.
okay, and then you just keep, and then you
You
just, not you just.
maintain
you
it,
should
right?
not use
So
that.
that's the goal, is that you
Okay.
maintain it. So it is a little bit different. There's some Blue Ribbon Commission
Okay,
work that we could do, but we have been designated a school of excellence.
okay, that would be nice to, really advertise.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Which
Is
one?
the schools to watch just middle
Yeah,
school?
it's middle.
Only middle school,
Mhm.
okay.
It's the national middle.
I thought, thank you.
And we'll be traveling to DC for that in June.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Great, thanks. All right, Amy?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me or Elliot first? Do you want me to go? Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I like to step into it.
Yes, no, sorry. I should put my glasses on before I. actually-
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to go, but I'll skip over you, Elliot.
Thanks, Amy. I'll be brief. Business ops, so rather than doing a full budget presentation, as Caroline noted, we're waiting for some real significant information to still come in. One piece of information that we did receive is our health insurance consortium has approved a rate increase of 6% for the 25-26 school year. If you recall, during our previous budget discussions, our initial estimate was 8.4%, so that's been a significant reduction for us. It's resulting in a savings of about $47,000 in cost avoidance, essentially, expense reductions that we're looking at for next year. So we're gonna continue to very surgically go into that budget and remove anything that we don't absolutely need and trying to close the budget gap that Caroline referenced in her presentation. So at this time, that's the biggest change. The tax levy that we previously shared of $27,782,136 has been reported to the Office of the State Controller prior to the March 1st deadline as required by state law. That is, again, for those watching at home or the ones that may not remember in the room, that's a 2.61 increase levy to levy over this current school year to next year's projection. We do not anticipate that changing. We need every bit of that revenue towards next year's budget, and everything that we're doing to close the budget gap is going to be essentially reducing our expenses to fit that tax levy with the state aid package, however it looks when it's finalized at the Albany level. In addition to budget planning, the technology department has received 3 responses to our E-rate application. At our last meeting, I shared that we were entering E-rate conversation. That's about $140,000 of available funding for technology infrastructure upgrades. We've got about $169,000 worth of work, so for, less than $30,000 extra, we're gonna be able to address some significant network needs in the district, throughout the district. So BOCES worked with us in that process. We were able to go through and vet the 3 bidders and come up with a best value award for the district. So that'll be projected for the summer of 25 or into the fall if things are delayed, sometimes with supply chain and things like that for those kind of technology devices. Later this week on Thursday, we're gonna have a technology committee meeting. Pretty excited about this. It's gonna be a little different than things that we usually do. We've been working for the vast majority of this year with Dutchess BOCES and CSI as their primary support vendor on a cybersecurity initiative. And they're going through, you may or may not remember us talking about NIST and CSF compliance. This is all the cybersecurity standards that public education institutions are being held to. So they've been really working with us to fine tune our approach to make sure that we're ready to react and respond appropriately to cyber threats. Making sure our continuity of instruction and continuity of operations are able to perpetuate despite an attack. And so our technology committee, comprised of our administrators, some of our board members, and some other district constituents, are going to go through a series of tabletop exercises to address what would happen if. And so the folks in CSI and BOCES, again, we have multiple tech directors either sitting or retired on these panels that are going to walk us through that process. But I think it's gonna be a really interesting endeavor. So we're looking forward to seeing how that works. That's gonna be our first time doing it. So I think kind of like we're very cutting edge with our school safety initiatives in general, and this is just adding that cybersecurity component to that. In discussions with other regional Mid-Hudson districts, we are towards the front end of that work. So we're pretty proud of the effort that's been going into that so far. We did touch on the facilities team already, and just, again, I can't thank the guys enough for the amount of time and effort they're putting into our buildings above and beyond their standard shifts, coming in early, staying late, making sure that we're addressing everything that we have to as it comes up. And seasonal prep is already underway for our spring sports. The other just regulatory note is our building condition survey reports have been submitted to NYSEG for all 4 buildings, and that just gets us on record with the current condition of our buildings. As a reminder for our capital endeavors, we want to make sure that Albany is very well aware of where we are conditionally, so that in the event that we do propose capital renovations with authorization, or on the unfortunate event that we have to declare an emergency repair or reconstruction, we've gone on record with the current status of our buildings, systems, and structures so that there's no surprises on the Albany side. On the capital project front, with the board's decision to move forward with another vote in May, our project team has already mobilized. So our vendor partners, including our architects, engineers, construction managers, and the EPC vendors, are going back through all their numbers. We shared some estimated costs at our last couple of meetings, but before the board adopts any resolutions, we want to make sure that those figures are up to date. There is a potential for some minor escalation, a couple of points here or there, depending on the scope of work that's being specifically addressed. So there have been a number of conversations over the last 2 weeks to make sure that what we put on the ballot is an accurate projection of what things are going to cost. So that's why we're not producing any sort of collateral or promotional materials until those numbers are vetted and presented to the board in one final package for resolution adoption. And that includes, again, the financial planners giving you their numbers, as well as bond counsel drafting the actual language of both the props and the resolution. We did not address SECRA here because, as you may recall from the last vote, with the scope not expanding or changing significantly, having an environmental impact beyond what the board has already had a resolution to approve, there is no need for an additional SECRA resolution. So that's one thing that's already been covered. My report, any questions or?
The networking stuff that you're planning to do this summer,
Yes, sir.
does any of that involve wiring, and do we, basically have to watch out for if we move forward with a capital project? We're not putting wires up there this summer and then having to cut them all out or move them or whatever.
Great question. Not for this specific project. This is really focused on a series of hardware switches, mostly that were installed in 2019 as part of that Meraki upgrade. So if you remember, just before, the year before we went into the COVID craziness, the district made a significant investment into wireless access points and infrastructure. The 130,000-ish projection is replacing the core switches of that system.
Okay.
But to your point, we have looked at the cabling since we had so much of the ceiling open, and when we did our assessment on December 27th, when the architects and engineers were here looking at the structure of the roof, they have referenced the condition of our cabling throughout this building. That has been built into the budget scope, especially in regards to our fire and life safety systems that will probably need to be upgraded or expanded. There are requirements for cable management in the ceiling systems, and so part of the roofing and ceiling reconstruction projects is going to be maintaining and properly bundling those cables and minimizing the amount of recabling that we have to do.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right,
Okay, all right. I appreciate the eagerness to hear my review. So for community relations update, just some events to mark on your calendar, and for those at home, the Skills Trades Fair at Arlington High School will be held from 6 to 8 p.m. That date was in the previous announcement. I will put it back in here, but it is at the Arlington High School. The Hudson Valley Construction Career Night is scheduled for Thursday, March 27th at Rockland Community College online. You can click the link there for more information. Internet safety for parents will be held Tuesday, April 8th, and that'll be virtual from 7 to 8:30. Parents that do want to attend, they will receive a Zoom link by registering through that link also in my newsletter or my report. And also just sharing out that there will be a family day at Vassar Preserve on April 15th. That also is in the weekly newsletter that goes out each Friday. So just mark your calendar events. This Friday, I'm excited to share about our Superintendent's Conference Day. You'll hear more about it on my next report, but it is a bit of planning for like a city event. I have people going in multiple different buildings at different times. We have facilities attending a safety training in addition to hearing from EAP. Our CSEA staff and facilities will be doing that, but instructional staff has from pre-K through 12, we'll have various consultants coming in. We have Edmentum, as Mr. Seifert shared, doing some more deep training in preparation for the fall as we make that transition from IXL to Edmentum, making sure that they have the tools and knowledge that they need after piloting that system for the year. Garrett, as Mr. Seif mentioned, will be back working not just with ELA and social studies. He's also going to do a little bit with science because he has been focusing on writing in the content area just to provide consistent support. So when you think about our students traveling to each of their teachers, each of them asking for writing, making sure our teachers are using similar vocabulary. Also, at the other end, I've allotted time for him to work with our 4th and 5th grade teachers so that as they are looking at their writing units, they understand what the expectation is for students and the type of supports that our 6 through 12 teachers are receiving. So I'm really excited how we're expanding his work. We are continuing the work that we began at the last Superintendent's Conference Day on the instructional best practices tool. So at the last Superintendent's Conference Day, we really focused on what those tools are, what they look like. Now we're going to really spend time identifying where in our curriculum are we already doing that and mapping it out so we don't lose sight, because as I previously mentioned, I believe the attestation is required annually from New York State. So this is really purposeful work because it's something that New York State is requiring, but it's also very helpful because it brings a heightened awareness of the good tools that are out there for us to use in our classroom and having those consistencies across grade levels vertically. So that's, I mean, there's more in there, but that gives you the gist. I am also going to point out our E&L team. I'm so proud of the work that they do. They are actually hosting the roundtable here during the second half of the Superintendent's Conference Day. So they will have their own department meeting in the beginning to fine tune some things that they've been working on, but they will be hosting 3 other school districts here to share best practices. And I have to give them props on the amount of learning that they are actually sharing with our colleagues, because they are so far ahead in the types of things that we're doing. And that's really just because of who they are as human beings. So I'm really proud of that work. Additional staff, I think this has come up at previous meetings, but we are providing 2 sessions of CPR and first aid training for staff members that weren't able to be trained earlier in the year or over the summer. So that is something that we have planned. And then just a review from when Megan Hargrave was here, just doing the test preparation. I had the opportunity to sit in while she was working with third grade. She puts together very comprehensive tools. So it's not just a one in that moment, like try to write down as much as you can. You really can engage in the conversation. She prepares what's a Padlet. So it's very interactive tools and allows them to zero in on specific passages for them to review with the students, give them practice in the types of questions that are asked so that they have familiarity and it's in alignment with what they're currently doing too. Some of it is just about how are the structures of the questions, how are they asking those questions. I'm really proud of our latest cohort. We have 10 teachers attending Orton Gillingham training. Typically it runs Monday to Friday, but one of the cohorts that I found is just Mondays, which allows for the teachers to unpack the training. So it's 5 separate Mondays instead of a Monday through Friday. So I feel that allows them to like do the training. It's a lot of information because it's a full day. So then they have the other 4 days of the week to recover and prepare for that next day. So I'm excited to continue this using our Title I funding. Also, this was our first full year using our second full year of using our adopted elementary report card aligned to the standards. So we are doing a review of that now that we're back on School Tool, because this is the time of year where we would make modifications. It is labor intensive for our parents that have scrolled through the elementary report card and seen multiple, every standard is there. Now that our teachers are more familiar with providing evidence and feedback on those standards, we will be trimming that back to make it more parent friendly as well. And another thing to look forward to is April 28th, the mark your calendar for the wellness fair. Ms. Lynch had talked about that in her report, but we really have done a great deal of preparation on providing both staff and community support for that wellness fair on the 28th of April. That's my report. Any questions?
Hey, where are we on the reason I'm asking this, we just handed a bunch of standards at the university on AI.
Mhm.
And basically they've approved, in fact, the school installed Copilot.
Yep.
You're allowed to use it on the second pass of a research paper.
Mhm.
They've given them tools, the teachers tools to see, you know, if this has actually been researched and read and understood, or simply, you know, just run the tool. Have we started building our policy out on AI and how and when it'll be allowed and how it's tested?
So the policy itself, I have not been a part of that piece, but what we have talked about is through the code of conduct and just through the lens of plagiarism. So the last revision that we did of the code of conduct was really looking at the integrity of the work that we use. Where I have focused on it was really the support of our teachers and making sure they know what tools are available to them. A, for the teacher side and working smarter, not harder, but also for what tools that they can use with students. And that's where our instructional technology person has come in. In addition to, as Elliot had mentioned earlier, and just reviewing the technology tools that we are using. The one that Turnitin was one that was not being used, but usually is used at the college, the university level. So Google has a comparable tool, and because that's within the domain of our protected tools that we use, that's one that our instructional technology specialist also is reviewing and is using so that the teachers can utilize that for plagiarism with our students. I think where my next level of work is really for the students to understand how to use it responsibly. I mean, we have a great tool here, so it's not so much like, I want to sneak it, right? Like, it's how do we use it responsibly? And that's like the same direction with, you know, we try to go there with cell phones, but we learned like that's a battle that we're never gonna win, but they have their own device now. But so how do we help them utilize AI for good and help them improve? So one way that we are currently doing that is through Newsella has a writing component to it. One of our 7th grade teachers, Ms. Gully, has really been spearheading this and experimenting with her groups because the students are able to type their papers right into the New Zealand writing prompt and get immediate feedback. And she's been like side by side looking at the feedback, make sure it aligns with the kind of feedback she would give. It doesn't give them the answers though. It gives them, say, like, look at the word, like organization of this piece, think about who your audience is. So it's really teaching them the craft of writing, not saying like, here's your paper, you're good to go, you have extra time. So I think like that's the level of work I would like to continue doing with how students are accessing it because colleges are allowing and expecting them to utilize it too.
And I assume this will end up in maybe it's not a policy, maybe I'm not sure where it would end up, but do we have a target for, you know, here's where you're allowed to use it, here's how you're allowed to use it, here's the tools that you can use, you know, something that I don't know, something that gives them parents and students and teachers, of course, a clean idea of this is, you know, if I find that somebody wrote a paper with just this, my next step is whatever.
I think, I think we can look at it as we review the code of conduct annually to see if we need to be more explicit about consequences. I know we do have a section in the consequences, particular to plagiarism. We didn't go that deep into specifically AI and the where and when, but that's a conversation that I can have with the principals just to talk through and work with our legal team on what exemplars there are out there.
Yeah, and I think we have a couple of different places that address some of the concerns that you're saying, so it might be helpful to talk through at a policy committee meeting just to see if there is something that would kind of bring it all together, because, you know, as you're all talking back and forth, I'm sure everyone is hearing code of conduct, but then there's also, you're saying like what tools can you use, what tools can't you use, so they were talking about like data privacy and law, and we were just able to buy into a larger scope data privacy agreement through the RIC. So I feel like it might be timely and purposeful to kind of bring that under one roof and really look at maybe a policy that sort of at least references the other places that that information is
I
captured.
mean, just having a place where the teacher is like, man, this looks, like they couldn't have written this.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
so we
but
have
what
those
do I do?
processes and we have the processes for like plagiarism in the code of conduct. But then even in terms of like, being very narrow with, to protect student and staff privacy, being very narrow with the selection of tools that they can use. And that becoming even more narrow with Google's most recent, data privacy, issue. So I think it might be purposeful, like I said, to kind of bring it all in together for a discussion at the policy committee.
We have an upcoming meeting and it definitely, there were a number of talks at NISBA about that. And the general consensus among NISBA is to have a policy, but it's not required. And around those specific details, like, well, does the district support it, but in what situations and what are the approved tools that you can use? And, yeah.
So when would this go to policy?
Our next meeting is
The 21st.
Okay, so maybe we can bring it back in like in April.
Yeah, we'll do a first pass and then we'll work with our legal counsel to update. And then we'll bring it to the board for review.
All right, very good. Anything else? All right. Future agenda items, you guys know if you need anything. Public comment question period. Anything online?
We have one, so it's from Peter Doro. It says, thank you for kindly asking, albeit begrudgingly, some hard questions about this third times its harm capital project and possible alternatives. I appreciate that, and I'm sure other taxpayers do as well. What I haven't heard address concerns enrollment. Enrollment has been declining for at least 15 years. Besides the obvious questions of why the annual budget and number of faculty and administrators didn't also decline pro rata along with enrollment, is this board doing any strategic long-term planning concerning enrollment. A brand new high school was in the community in the early 2000s based on a huge increase in enrollment that never materialized. According to state data, the only other metric I can see that has increased in the past 15+ years is the number of economically disadvantaged students. You have 50 kindergartners and less than 50 students in grades 1 through 3. What's the plan for the next 15 years and how does $60 million fit into the equation?
Any other comments or questions?
None.
There's a comment on YouTube again. I think we just need to be right on our live feed. There's a question. I think people just get confused when they go to watch it. It's very simple. It's just, I mean, I could tell you what it says, but I know that's not the way to do it. I'm just saying it happens almost every meeting.
And we really need to shut off comments on that one so that they come to this.
I can ask it as a board member if you want. It's very simple. I think I've asked before. It's just how will cutting Department of Ed affect students? I mean, I don't know anybody has the answer to that, but it's kind of a hot topic right now, so I didn't know if anybody wanted to comment, at least kind of where we're at with that, but.
So most of our federal monies come in the form of grants. Those are covered by IDEA and IDEA is written as law, so it actually isn't, that funding stream is not currently dependent on the existence of the Department of Education. New York also is a state that pays money that is then reallocated to other states. So it all kind of depends what the plan is to dissolve the Department of Education. And from what you hear, if the plan is to put the money back into the states, New York should be okay. Because a lot of money that we send out that goes to other places could potentially come back. I don't know how that'll be redistributed around New York State. But at least those are the first passes at the conversations that I've been hearing. True, not true, I can't necessarily tell you if I don't know what the plans are, but that's sort of the conversations that we've been hearing.
Next question, for the purpose of people putting comments and questions in there that we don't like fully address, can we say something like, you know, if there's a question in there, please call this office or that office, so that they don't feel like they're asking a question and it's just kind of getting read and not answered.
We're gonna, I'm sorry, Caroline, but we can shut off the comments on
Yeah,
that.
we
Can you
shut
put the
off
link in the description?
comments on YouTube. We can do that.
So when they go right to the
And so
comment.
I think that the piece of it is that in some cases, some of these questions are addressed, have been addressed in other meetings, and we can address them as well. I mean, I can address parts of the question that is on the public comment if you would like. There are parts that we have addressed in previous meetings in terms of enrollment, in terms of staffing, and also in terms of future planning for staffing. I'm happy to address some of that right now, though I wasn't prepared for this. I can say specifically that while enrollment has declined, we have had an increase in certain subgroups of our population that require specific staffing and or non-integrated settings. We've added 2 classrooms of pre-K in the last, I would say 5 years. In the last 5 years, we've added 2 classrooms of pre-K. We've added 2 classrooms of self-contained special education programming. At one point, we did have a 3rd classroom of pre-K. That staff has been redistributed into other vacancies. So through attrition, we have saved that particular position. We've also saved several other positions around the district in my tenure here. Additionally, we have seen an increase in specific types of special education programming requiring a lower class ratio, which required in some cases new hires and or the replacement of teachers, even though our overall enrollment is going down. We have lost sections of particular content areas in terms of an entire team of teachers throughout the district in the secondary schools. And I would say that in math and ELA, we've lost more than just one staff member to attrition. We have a plan of not filling at this current moment, definitely not filling 3 positions for the fall and actually reducing the number of sections at the elementary level, in particular grade levels with low enrollment. So that's our plan for the fall. We continue to analyze this data. One of the things that I think I've been very vocal and public about is looking at our students who are placed out of district that may require a low student to staff ratio, but it is in student best interest to be educated in their home district with their neighborhood peers. And it is also cost beneficial to the district typically if there's a couple of them with similar needs and also at a similar grade band or age band 36 months, within 36 months, to bring them back. It is cost beneficial. Most importantly, it's also educationally sound and beneficial to those students. So there's a lot that we have already done. You know, I guess it's not as publicized as some of the budget materials and or capital project materials, but it is something that we do very frequently discuss in Board of Education meetings. And, you know, just being mindful that when we're making decisions about students, our priority is what's in the best interest of them and their success. And then we make budgetary and staffing decisions as a result of an analysis of that. I would also say that there is an enrollment feasibility study that was done back in 2018. One of the things that I had mentioned at a previous meeting, and I don't have that off the top of my head, is that some of the counts that were utilized in that particular study were actually, I'm not sure where they came from specifically, but they were not specifically aligned to the targets that were agreed upon by the Board of Education several years ago when I was in my previous role. And so that does leave a little bit of a discrepancy between the, what I would say, the percentage of use of the building. I know that's a poor way of saying it, but the percentage of the building that's being used throughout the day is not necessarily accurate to the way that classes are structured based on the agreements of the Board of Education in this more current time, post-COVID. We've also seen an uptick in certain student populations that already existed within the district but now require different services. So we've actually increased our AIS services, our ENL services. So that's academic intervention services, English as a new language services, and also our special education services in pockets. We've seen an uptick in recommendations for things like resource room, as opposed to learning center, which is going from a 15-to-1 ratio to a 1-to-5 ratio. So we have to think of, we have 3 periods of resource room for every 1 period of learning center. So if it's truly in the child's interest to have a resource room, that has a lower class size ratio, right? Additionally, again, post-COVID, we've done a lot in terms of trying to narrow that achievement gap. And so there are many classes that have been added, like win time classes, that have been added to sort of re-level the playing field to where it was pre-COVID. So a lot of this, you know, maybe it's a temporary swell that as enrollment goes down and our staff does move on for purposes of retirement and or other life choices. You may see some constriction in the budget that hasn't been typical in the past. But right now we're focusing on providing the best education we can for our children, meeting their needs, and being very transparent with the Board of Education and the community in this forum.
Caroline, also hasn't the state mandated, mandates, unfunded mandates by state, and rules and regulations and procedures have changed and constantly are in flux to change, thus costing the district more money and different class sizes and such.
I mean, quite
So
honestly,
it's not just the decision of this district to make a lot of these changes. It's in compliance of the state legislature and the State Department of Education.
and it continues to change, right? And so we continue to attempt to be proactive, but somehow we feel like we're often chasing the mandates and being reactive. We don't often get a lot of lead time with some of these mandates. But one of the things, I mean, it's something that I feel is very important but teacher evaluations, right? When I was in the classroom, there was one observation a school year. Now minimally staff members get 2 observations a school year. So, and that's tenured, teachers, right? And so non-tenured teachers get a minimum of 3 observations per school year. And just looking at that amount of time that takes, right? That requires an administrator to do that. Along with additional students, who are in programs such as special education and or ENL and or AIS. There's also meetings and planning and whatnot that goes along with that, that requires, administrative oversight. So there's lots of stuff that I know, people may not understand, and I completely understand that we're a small district. But that just means that there's far fewer people to be able to accomplish all of the things that have to be done regardless of the size of your district. And so, you know, maybe we're fortunate to have fewer students who potentially have fewer behaviors, right? Maybe. We're lucky to have that. But a lot of the other required, I would say compliance, requirements from New York State and the federal government, they don't go away. And so somebody is required to do that as part of their role here.
Thank you.
I'm not sure, because it was before any of us were on the board, but when they decided to do the high school, there was a group, and I want to say it's Dutchess County, but basically that presented to all of Dutchess County, I think it was called a live birth rate,
Yes.
was dramatically rising. And somehow between when the high school was completed and, 10 years later, or maybe not 10 years, but, 5 or 6 years later, that hasn't reversed itself because it's still, it seems to have leveled off a little bit, pretty much, but, there was, and I really don't know who did this study, but I do remember hearing about it, and this, live birth rate thing was, or the rate, I guess, was, a driving force behind a lot of schools expanding their facilities, not just Millbrook.
And I also think that one thing that should be noted is, the most recent, and so that, I guess the answer to the question is yes, we've had conversations about the potential of another feasibility type study. It doesn't negate the need for our buildings to be repaired and renovated in the ways in which, we're looking at, because regardless of a plan to decommission a building, sell a building, whatever, it would have to be fit for sale. So, yes, we've had conversations about that. They will be ongoing, just to be fiscally responsible and responsive. But the other thing is in terms of the feasibility study that was conducted in the, I believe it was the 17-18 school year, published in the 18 year, we are trending at the high end of those projections. So I presented on that. I don't remember quite when, maybe last year. I think it was last year. I presented on the trend and how we were measuring up to that study. So we can, unearth that again, we can look at it, and that's fine. But I do also want to say that, there was no regard in that study for adding pre-K programs, bringing back special education programs, doing any of the things that we have done. So, it was data in that point in time, and I can tell you how they measure up for student to student, but it could in some cases be comparing apples to oranges, depending on the needs of our students today versus the needs back then.
Any other questions or
For
comments?
not being prepared to answer that. You seem very prepared to answer that.
Well, it's the work we do every
So
day,
thank
right?
you, thank you, yeah. But I do think it's, like, even instead of taking all the time in a meeting, I think we maybe could say, if there's a question online, please call Elliot, Caroline, Rick, somebody, and they'd be happy to walk you through it.
Yeah.
Now, the questions are to the board, and we are the board, so if we're going to take questions of none, of somebody not physically being in the room, then the question should be answered by the board. and not just say, well, call, one of the staff. But the maintenance, and I think a lot of this has to go with, maintenance being deferred by previous boards. Nobody in this room on the board now or in the administration, was here back when those boards, for whatever reason, I'm not saying good or bad, deferred maintenance that caused this, the condition, some of these, such as the middle school is in anyway. And that happens to be one of the reasons that I did run for the board, because things weren't working. Of course, I didn't know the roof was not in bad condition, but I knew sinks weren't working. I physically saw when my son was in the middle school, lots of things weren't working. And I ran to the board to get things working, like water fountains. So I can't answer why things were not maintained or repaired, but that's what this board, this current board, is trying to work on and fix.
Yeah. Okay. Next is a proposed executive session. Before I do that, I want to make sure everyone on the phone or whatever is clear that the meeting doesn't end because we go into executive session. Any action we have to take has to be done in public. So we will have discussions regarding people and specific employees. But when we come back, if there's action to be taken, when we return from executive session, that's where we'll do it. So, if you can stick around, fantastic. With that, do I have a motion to go to executive session? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right.